Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. My name is Steven Railston. It's a Friday morning and I'm joined by Tyrell Marshall for this episode. We're going to reflect on Ruben Amorim's first few days, technically in charge. He has started work, he is meeting people, but he's not been on grass. And we're going to look ahead in the second part, or look back on Tyrell Malacia's return to action on Tuesday night, because he played for the academy against Huddersfield in a fixture. So it was great to see him back on the pitch after a lengthy absence. But to begin with, Tyrone, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Stephen. Yes, very good. Yourself?
Very well. Sam Fender's released a new single at midnight last
Geordie
night. So
boy.
I've been listening to that all morning. Probably around 100 times I've listened to that already. And you're off to the Cortinas tonight, aren't you?
I
The
am, mate.
Co-op
Yeah,
Arena.
yeah. First time I've been to Co-op Live, so yeah, gonna remortgage this afternoon so I can afford some drinks.
And the
My
flares that you're going to bring in.
and the flares that I've got to smuggle in, and the smoke bombs, of course. No pyro, no party, quite famously. So yeah, first time I've been there. I did notice yesterday it's £25 to park in the official car park, which is absolutely scandalous. So I'm going to be finding some street parking somewhere, or rather, my wife is going to be finding some street
I
parking
was going
somewhere
to say
tonight.
that
I
suggests that
will
you're
be
not drinking
drinking.
if you're driving.
No, I will be drinking. Although maybe not many at some of the prices I've heard inside the Co-op Life, it does not sound like it's a particularly cheap place to drink. It'd be fair to say.
Sam Fender's playing there in a few weeks' time, so I'm off for the first time. That's the Co-op Live. It looks mint, doesn't it? It looks excellent, that arena. It looks really
It does
good.
look really good. Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, you'll have to tell us how it goes.
I will.
Anyways, the football and Ruben Amorim. We're still waiting on a visa for Amorim. He obviously touched down in Manchester earlier in the week. Is there much to say on that front, Ty? Have you got a little update?
Not really, beyond that they are still waiting. I mean, I think we all probably thought it would be done now. I mean, when the story came out, United said it would be done. You know, they expect it to be done swiftly and efficiently. There's never a time frame on these things, but from their experience, they said swiftly and efficiently. I think United were quite disappointed that some of the stories on Sunday night reported it as a blow or a setback, and they were saying it's just routine. And they said the process. I've done the story this morning. I've had a lot of people asking me why this wasn't done 4 weeks ago when he was appointed. And from what United said, it could only be finalised once Amorim and his staff were in the country. So it could only be finalised on Monday, I believe. I mean, you would imagine if it could be done 4 weeks ago, it would have been done 4 weeks ago. So, but yeah, the suggestion was it would be swift, that it's always efficient. Obviously, here we are 5 days later, and it hasn't been done. I mean, it could be done at any moment. By the time you're listening to this on Friday afternoon, they might well all have visas, but obviously the clock is ticking now. I mean, there's plenty of time before his first game, but he can't take training without a visa. None of his staff can take training without a visa. And the first training session, I'm not sure if it's Monday or Tuesday. I think it's Monday, but not 100% sure. But there's been no one in this week. There's been no training sessions planned for this week, so it's had no impact whatsoever yet. And if he gets it later today or Saturday, then it's going to have no impact. But obviously, the closer it gets to that first training session, United's non-internationals, of which there are a fair few, to be fair, will be back Monday or Tuesday at Carrington. And that is when Amorim and his staff would start working with them on the grass, but they can only do that with a visa. So, I mean, as things stand, you're looking at Darren Fletcher and Andrews Georgeson taking that session. But, I mean, given United expected it to be done swiftly, I would still guess that it will be done by the start of next week. But like I say, the clock is ticking, and it is just a waiting game, really. There's no official update beyond the same update that at the moment they don't have visas. That process is ongoing. Should say that they don't. United are expecting any issues with Amorim or with any of his staff. They expect them all to get visas. There shouldn't be any problem. It's just a case of waiting for that paperwork to arrive, and obviously it is a visa and paperwork for 6 separate people.
Yeah, I mean, he headed straight to Carrington, didn't he, after arriving at Manchester Airport on Monday? And I tweeted, look, United is still waiting for that visa. And someone replied, and I included, well, that means he obviously can't coach on grass, because that's been the phrase that we've used, hasn't it, in the last few days. And someone tweeted, well, can he take training in the car park then? I suppose as a fan, you probably would think that if you're reading that on Twitter. Look, he met a few players, as you say, because a lot of them have been on international duty. So Kobe Mainoo, for example, was there, Mason Mount. And then he made a visit to Old Trafford on Thursday. We've obviously seen the photos, Ty. There's been quite a few of them of Amram. And he's got a massive smile in every single photo, doesn't he? We've talked about his personality and how he speaks brilliant English. He seems really warm and friendly. He just comes across quite well, doesn't he? I mean, we've not heard from him yet. Why have we not had an unveiling? But from what we've seen, he does seem like quite a nice bloke.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me started on the unveiling. I mean, this is the second podcast in a row where I'm going to mention a conversation I've had at school drop off in the morning. But speaking to a United fan there, I was venting about the lack of an unveiling this morning, which I'll come on to in the podcast.
Should we have our own segment on the podcast where it's Tyrone Marshall's school-run conversations?
What's been discussed at the school gates? Yeah, quite possibly. Obviously, tend to get a lot of your questions about United, and I don't mind answering them. But yeah, the lack of an unveiling was. I mean, maybe that was something I brought up this morning because I do think it's ridiculous, to be honest. I'll come on to that in a second. The first bit, he exudes warmth, doesn't he? That's what you'd say. We're kind of piecing it together from pictures we've seen, from the odd 30, 40-second clip we've seen. But he is always smiling. His interaction with the players on Tuesday with Yoro, Shaw, Collier, Mainu and Mount, I think it was the 5 players that were in doing rehab and recovery, looked, really warm. Really engaging, all hugs and stroking faces and this kind of thing,
stroking
faces. He had an arm around Luke Shaw's neck, I think, at one point, and it looked a warm engagement, if you know what I mean, and a warm start. And we only saw a tiny little clip of what he said to them, but I liked that. I liked it where it said, "I was talking to me," and he said, "Guys, we have to have fun," and it's international break, so we will literally write about anything, but I thought it was interesting enough to write a piece on it because, I mean, I said so often last season, a few times at the start of this season, that nobody looks like they've been having fun at Old Trafford for a long time, fans and players, and none of the players look to be having much fun under Eric Ten Hag. So,
we've seen this a lot, though, haven't we, Ty? Where kind of remember when Solskjaer came into the club and the whole thing was putting smiles back on faces. It feels like we're back at the same place, doesn't it? Yeah, lifting the mood.
Yeah, I mean, I said in that piece that you look at all the most successful teams, Liverpool under Klopp, City. Guardiola, it always looks to be fun, and maybe that's because they're winning, but it's not necessarily the case that the winning comes before the fun. Sometimes maybe the fun comes before the winning. You think of Klopp, I mean, that looked like fun, whatever Liverpool were doing, and that's kind of the place you want to get to with United and United's players, and you get the feeling Amorim can do that. And like you said, the stuff at Old Trafford was great, some really good photos. There's been that little clip this morning of him saying it feels like I belong here, and I think there's going to be a further teaser this afternoon. He has done an MUTV interview, so he is speaking to someone. Those MUTV interviews they never give a lot away. They're club interviews. Obviously, I'm sure he's going to say some very nice things, but it's very different to an unveiling, which he hasn't done. His first press conference is going to be the pre-Ipswich one at Carrington. It's a complete change of policy. I can't remember the last time United didn't unveil a manager at Old Trafford. I think even unveiled Solskjaer as permanent manager when he'd been there as interim manager for several months. So to not do it with a manager who you could, I know City have said otherwise, but United could easily say, look, we have beaten Manchester City to him. It's obvious City we're going to be interested. He's one of the most highly rated managers in Europe. We've got him. Here he is. Talk to us. And he's a great talker. He's a really engaging talker. His English is great. I watched back Ten Hag's first press conference at the end of Ten Hag's reign, and his English was really shaky at that point, and that didn't stop United from unveiling him. That was the Monday after the Palace defeat, and it was his first day. And all the questions, it'd been a wretched season for United, but all the questions are pretty positive because it is a fresh start. And if you'd have done unveiling this week, all the questions to Amorim are positive. By waiting until next Friday, it's just going to be a complete mess, a complete bun fight. You can't fit the same number of people at Carrington in as you can at Old Trafford. There's going to be dozens of Portuguese journalists who I know have asked to come over that want to be there for Amorim's unveiling, who just aren't going to get in at Carrington. They're going to be trying to storm the training ground down that tiny lane to Carrington because they just won't get in. People who don't normally come to Old Trafford, TV crews who don't normally come to Old Trafford won't get in because, you've been in that press conference room. It's just not big enough. There's regulars now who don't get in because there's just not the access. So to do it that way, I think is bizarre. I think every club does an unveiling. I mean, regular listeners to the podcast when I support Shrewsbury, we're 24th in League One and have appointed a new manager this week, and he was appointed on Tuesday and unveiled on Wednesday with the director of football sat next to him, a director of football who's under intense pressure and he's getting a lot of criticism, because that's what clubs do. You think back to the summer and Liverpool unveiled Slot and had Richard Hughes next to him. Chelsea unveiled Maresca, and I'm pretty sure had at least one of their directors of football next to him. It's just what clubs do, and I don't understand why United aren't unveiling a manager when they've appointed one that absolutely everyone is saying that's a great appointment. You know, I can't. I think you'd have to search long and hard to find a journalist or a fan who is saying, I don't like that. It's the wrong appointment. Everyone thinks this is a good appointment. He's a brilliant communicator. He's engaging in front of a camera. He's great copy. Why is he not doing something at Old Trafford? And, you know, I posted a little bit facetiously on Twitter yesterday because there was a picture of him that the club released sat behind the press desk at Old Trafford. It's like he could have done an unveiling while he was there. And I don't understand why he hasn't done it. I think it's mad. I think it's absolutely crazy. And I don't get, you know, no one at United has explained why he isn't doing it. And I don't understand it at all. And it's not just, obviously it would have been great for us because it would have filled a lot of space in an international week, but the fans want to hear from a new manager as well. And they want to hear from him in more depth than an MUTV interview, talking in general platitudes about the club. They want to hear more from him. They want to hear stuff that MUTV won't ask. And yeah, I don't get it. And if anyone at United does explain it, I still don't think I'd get it, to be honest.
It is bizarre. Bizarre is probably the word, isn't it? When you've got a
Yeah.
new manager coming in, you want to show him off. You want to get eyes onto him and make people hear what he wants to say. And as you said, it will all be positive stuff. All the questions would be positive. So it's a shame that hasn't happened this week. It is. I initially thought it might be visa related. However, he's obviously doing club media, which is set to come out. So it can't be because of that. Someone's obviously made the decision. Why that decision has been made, we might find out. But either way, it is bizarre, as you've said. He turned up to Carrington wearing a Valentino hoodie and a Moncler coat. Ruben Amorim did, Ty. He's more stylish than the previous manager. I'll give him that. But we're talking about how warm he is with the players and kind of the rapport that he already looks to have or that he will look to build. He's 39 years old. He only relatively recently retired from his playing career. It's interesting, isn't it, when you have such a young manager? I sometimes think, is it easier for those coaches to build and forge personal relationships with members of the squad because they can really relate to those players? They're young, they've only recently came out of the game themselves, and they've probably got a lot in common. And I think that will help Amorim forge those relationships in the squad.
Yeah, I think over the last decade or so, there's been a clear shift towards younger managers. It's gone away from, you know, those coaches in late 50s, 60s who were seen as having learned their trade and experienced and a good time to appoint them. It's now gone to, you want a young manager, and we're seeing younger and younger managers, and we're seeing more and more managers who, I mean, Amorim did have a good playing career. He played for Portugal, but he also shifted his attention to management very quickly. Now, I've done a feature for the weekend about his time on a football coaching master's degree at the University of Lisbon, which he started on at 32. That's when he was doing the internship at United for a week. So at 32, he'd already given up playing and was focusing on having a management and coaching career. And you're seeing that more and more. And, you know, he's young at 39. He's young to be managing United at 39, but he's got a lot of experience still, 250 odd games. And compared to some of his assistants, I mean, he's ancient. Carlos Fernandez, his assistant, is 29. I think it's I'll try that again. Adelio Candido, I think, one of his first team coaches, is 28. So, you know, these are players considerably younger than some of United's squad. Tom Eaton's 38. Johnny Evans is 36. These coaches are 8-9 years younger than some of these United players. So it is an incredibly young coaching staff, but the dynamic between them seems to be really good. And I do think, you know, you are seeing more and more that teams are looking to go for young coaches because they do bring that dynamic, and that dynamic between a head coach and his staff and the players now seems to be really important. It's kind of a generational thing as well. I think you see it in management in every industry, that generationally it's gone away from the kind of strict, no nonsense, almost. I mean, I guess Fergie would be the obvious example of United. He could do
even
both,
with Ferguson, yeah, exactly. Even
he could put an arm around the
successful
shoulder.
coaches, 20 years ago, their man management was still.
He knew how to
exceptional.
manage. Yeah, he knew how to manage each individual. But I don't think there's many individuals now coming through who would benefit from the stick. I think it's the majority of the generation coming through now want the carrot rather than the stick. They need an arm around the shoulder and encouragement rather than a rollicking in front of their teammates. There's still a place for it. I'm sure it still happens, but it feels like there's kind of a generational shift there, and probably that's why you're getting younger and younger coaches who can empathise with this generation. We said, I mentioned a couple of the old guard there, but most of this squad are pretty young. I mean, there's maybe you can have 5 in the starting 11 within a month or so when Mainoo's back, who are going to be, and Yoro back, that are 21 or younger. And I think it's easier to manage them and to understand them as a 39-year-old with 2 20-somethings on your coaching staff than it is as a 50-year-old with a load of 50-year-olds on your coaching staff. I think that's probably just common sense.
And using young players was such a crucial part of his success at Sporting Lisbon as well. That really underpinned his time over there. So we're expecting the exact same thing during his time in Manchester. I noticed his exchange with Mason Mount. I suppose you could kind of glean colour from all of his little exchanges, couldn't you, with the players? Stroking faces, as you say. I
feel like I'm going to regret that.
But the Mount one's interesting, isn't it? Because his first season, let's just say how it is, it was a disaster. Blighted with different injury concerns. This season's campaign was supposed to be the one that he could kick on and really prove himself at the club. He's picked up another little muscle injury, so it's been stop-start again. But when you speak to people who have worked with Amorim, we've both done features or will, and you learn about him a bit more and what he wants from his players and what he wants from his team. One of the common words, I'm pretty sure you saw it as well, Ty, is intensity, isn't it? He wants his team to be very intense, high energy. And Mason Mount, when he's fit, ticks that box for me. We saw that at the start of the season where he was kind of part of that new pressing structure, Eric Ten Hag's pressing structure, which it was a bit of a mess at times, wasn't it? But it was an interesting point that Mount was used in that way. Could he have a role in Amorim's team? Because we've still not seen the best of Mason Mount. Some fans are becoming really, really impatient and thinking it's time for him to go. He's just not being good enough and it's time to cut the losses. But he should be given to the end of the season to prove himself, shouldn't he, really?
Yeah, I mean, he needs a run of being fit, really. I mean, he barely had any injury issues at Chelsea. His availability was a big strength, and then he's come to United and, like everyone, is just constantly injured. I mean, there's certainly a role for him there. When you think, we've spoken a lot about Amorim's system of kind of playing two number 10s behind a striker. I mean, Mount and Fernandes could fulfill those roles very easily, and I think would both bring real energy to those number 10 roles. I think the reason we've barely spoken about Mount as a potential starter under Amorim is just because you're essentially taking away an attacking position, and United have got a lot of attacking players to fit in. You're taking away the wingers, essentially. And unless you play Ahmad as a wing back, which for me, I think he's the only one of those 3 wingers, Garnacho and Rashford, that I could see playing as a wing back, maybe at left wing back. You're really thinking one of those number 10 roles is going to have to go to Rashford, Garnacho or Ahmad. Although I can see Rashford, and I said this on last week's with Samuel, I think I can see Rashford getting a run as the number 9 under Højlund. But yeah, a Mount could certainly play one of those number 10 roles. And the fact there are 2 number 10 roles should, in theory, be beneficial to him, because I think that's probably his best position. As much as he was signed to kind of be this connector for United, it's never really worked. I think when he was signed, Ten Hag probably envisaged a midfield of Casemiro, Mount and Fernandes, and Mount almost being the shuttler between the two, shuttling back to Casemiro and forward to Fernandes. But it's never really happened to him, because that midfield barely ever, if ever, played together. Kobbie Mainoo came in and has essentially done that better than Mount just because he's been fit. So, it does feel like he never had a role under Ten Hag, did he? He never had a best position. And I thought he did start the season pretty well. I thought it was very obvious how much he improved United's pressing. And it will be interesting to see where he goes. But, when we look at that 3-4-2-1, if you want to call it that, I don't feel like we've really spoken about Mount for a position there. Purely,
we've not spoken about him because it sounds harsh, but he has become a bit of an irrelevance, hasn't he, really?
Yeah.
Because of his fitness problems. But look, it's a clean slate now. If he gets back to fitness, he's got a new manager in charge, or a new head coach. It's a time to kick on, isn't it? This is it. Now it's now or never, really, for Mount.
Yeah, totally. Like you say, I think I get the idea. We should talk about Luke Shaw in the second part, but Mount and Shaw, you get the impression that fans have almost kind of given up with them. That they've seen so little of them. Shaw more than Mount, certainly. but it's kind of like, oh, they're just injured. They're going to offer nothing. They can't stay fit. So what's the point? I think that's definitely the case with Shaw. I think it's partly the case with Mount, but he needs a run for the rest of the season, really, where he is staying fit, and he does have to contribute. And like I say, the fact there's 2 number 10 roles there, I think is ideal for him. And if he can get back to his best, you'd certainly look at playing him in one of them.
I completely agree. Lastly, then, we'll leave this part with a word on Ruud van Nistelrooy, Ty. I know we discussed him a lot in the first episode, but he obviously officially now has left the club. We'll just reiterate the point that we made earlier in the week. He did fantastically well during that little spell, and he handled himself really well, didn't he? Brilliantly, I'd say.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, handled himself with a lot of dignity, a lot of class, did what was asked of him. I think any interim manager or caretaker manager would like a 4-game run that he had when they're all at home and 3 of them are against pretty weak teams. But he did what was asked of him, 3 wins and a draw. I think we both said that if Ten Hag was still in charge, I don't think those same results would have been guaranteed. He hands over a team who've had confidence rebuilt, that have had some decent results. I don't think he was ever likely to stay on under Amorim's staff, as much as fans would like to see it. Amorim's got his own assistants, I don't think, and Van Nistelrooy wasn't going to stay around to put the cones out and be 4th or 5th coach in line. So, Van Nistelrooy wasn't, and I just don't think it was ever going to happen. But it's been a good few months for him as well. He took a job at United coaching when he was in the frame for the Burnley manager's job, and I think now he would probably get a better head coach or manager's job than Burnley through the work he's done.
Yeah, I saw reports cropping up in Italy that he might have been linked to the Roma job, actually.
Right.
Claudio Ranieri's rocked up there, hasn't he? And that'll be interesting. But I completely agree. Yeah, I think he's destined for bigger things than Burnley. So it'll be interesting to follow Van Nistelrooy's management career. We'll leave it then for part 1. We'll be back in a moment for part 2. Welcome back to part 2 of the Manchester is Red podcast. Now we're going to discuss Tyrell Malacia's return on Tuesday night, because he made his return to action for the academy, the under-21s, against Huddersfield Town in the EFL Trophy, formerly called the Papa John's Trophy, of course. It's now Bristol Street Rovers, I think, isn't it? But
Bristol Street Motors.
Yeah, Bristol Street Rovers.
Bristol Street Rovers. Should be called that.
We've all been there before. Look, he was off for 517 days, Ty. So as I said in the little intro, it was fantastic to see him back on the pitch, because he's had 2 rounds of knee surgery. He last played for the Netherlands in June 2023. So he was always going to be a little bit rusty. But having said that, we were both obviously watching him very closely. I thought he looked relatively sharp. He played 45 minutes. He was substituted at half-time for Harry Amas. But it was a good, pleasing comeback, and he would have been delighted, wouldn't he? Because to go through that mental torture of such a prolonged period on the sidelines, watching his peers progress and crack on in their careers, and he's stalling and really struggling in his rehabilitation, it would have just been brilliant for him on a personal note, wouldn't it, to make his return on Tuesday night?
Yeah, it really would. And I think, the fact his family, given the level of games he's played in his senior career, the fact his family are in the stands at Huddersfield for a Bristol Street Rovers trophy game is, I think, says it all, how big an occasion it was for him. And, he got through 50 minutes with the 5 added. I thought he looked solid. I thought he looked sharp. There was one energetic run forward. Beyond that, I think he generally held his position at left back, but he was solid. Travis Benyon praised his attitude afterwards and did touch on kind of how he needs a bit of luck now. And yeah, I just thought it was really good. It's going to be interesting where he goes next. I mean, speaking to people close to him, it feels like he's been ready for a while and that he thinks he'd be ready to play at Ipswich. Speaking to people at United, they feel like they're trying to have to hold him back. And I get the impression that there's probably no chance he's going to be available for Ipswich, given United's viewpoint on it. But clearly he feels like he is now ready, that he is, he's been back in team training for 2 months now, really. It was September he was back in team training, and that's a long time. And you can understand why United are being cautious when he's had 2 surgeries, when he's gone through everything that he has. It's always going to be a difficult time to be out. Obviously, there was a lot of rumours around him last year that he'd vanished, he'd stop updating his Instagram account, people asking where he'd gone, whether he's going to have to retire. that was never on the cards, never on the agenda. I think he came off social media purely to focus on his recovery and wasn't a huge user beforehand. But I think, like you say, it was a great moment for him, and the challenge now is to build up that fitness. I think I wouldn't be surprised if we played for the under-21s again. They've got Altrincham next week in the National Cup, I think it's called
it's
now.
a new competition.
Yeah. So there's a possibility he plays there. They've got a few European games as well, haven't they? I don't know when the next one of those is, but I'd imagine there's a chance he gets maybe one more game for the under-21s before United try and ease him back into the matchday squad and give him some first-team action.
I turned to you when he actually roamed forward in that first half, the run that you mentioned, and I said it's actually difficult to remember how good Malacia was in attacking scenarios because it's just so long since we've watched them play. He obviously kind of won a starting role, didn't he, at the beginning of his time with his club, and jousted Luke Shaw out of the team, but Shaw worked his way back in, and Malacia was kind of a backup for the rest of that season. Great to see him back, though. In terms of the medium to long-term future, though, Ty, with Malacia, obviously a new coach has come in. He's going to play a new system with wing backs. Ipswich is on the horizon. That's probably going to come too soon, we imagine. But Malacia is going to try break into that team now, and his contract expires in the summer of 2026. So at the end of this season, he's then got another year. I mean, football's just so brutal, isn't it? Because he's faced the challenge of overcoming this horrible knee injury that he's had, 2 rounds of surgery. And now, immediately, once he's actually back on the grass, he's facing another challenge of basically fighting for his future at the club, because that is the reality of the situation.
It is, yeah. But the one advantage he has, and I think this is why Malacia and his camp are pushing so strongly that I'm ready now. If I'm asked to play at Ipswich, I'm ready. I'm fit enough. I can go. And I think one of the reasons for that is that essentially he's not lost ground to anyone in that battle. It's not like he's been out for 16 months. And in the meantime, someone has made that left back spot his own. I mean, Luke Shaw's barely played in that time either. I think Shaw played 15 games last season and has not played for United since February. So he's been out for 9 months, has made 15 appearances while Malacia has been out. So they're kind of in the same position. It's not like Malacia is coming back and Shaw's been exceptional for 18 months. And now you're like, well, it's good Malacia's back, but he's got no chance of playing. They're kind of at the same level. Shaw's only just returned to training. I don't think Shaw's going to need under 21 games. I think Ipswich is probably too soon for Shaw still. But if I had to, if you asked me to pick, I'd say Shaw will play for the first team before Malacia, I think. But it's still a really tight role because there isn't a left back, and United have been desperate for a left back for 9 months. They're now going to be desperate for a left wing back. I don't see Mazraoui or Dalot playing on that flank as a wing back, given what Amorim wants from them. So you may be looking at, it's got to be Shaw, Malacia or Ahmad perhaps. And like I said, the one thing that would give Malacia hope that he can come back and make that spot his own, which is his target, is the fact that he hasn't lost ground to a rival. If anything, Shaw's lost ground to him by the fact that...
Do you think? Because Shaw was so ahead in terms of quality, wasn't he? I understand.
Yeah, he was. And I think when I say he's lost ground to him, maybe I'm only talking about in the eyes of the fans, because I think there's been a very noticeable shift with supporters and how they view Shaw. And I think the whole England thing in the summer, playing for England, getting back fit for England, coming back to Carrington and getting an injury in week 1, I think at that point fans just sort of threw their hands up and went, "This is a joke. The guy's just never fit. He can't be relied on." And clearly, I did some stats that I think he's had 20-something different injuries now. He's missed. I think he's played 275 games for United and missed 265 or something like that. I mean, he's fit for 1 in 2 games, and he's been here for 10 years. So you can understand why that view has taken hold. We did say on Monday maybe that he is actually the player who's played left wing back probably most of all in that squad. I think Malacia played it as a kid at Feyenoord, come through Feyenoord's youth system. So he can play it. And certainly when he's at his best, Malacia, I think he's certainly got an edge in maybe fitness and athleticism and could fulfill that role for Amorim, bombing up and down the flank. But in terms of quality and selection, he probably, Shaw probably hasn't lost ground. But in terms of how it's viewed by fans, I think he probably has. And I do think that's why Malacia is desperate to get back.
I agree with that. I mean, it just doesn't really matter, though, does it, public
No,
opinion?
it doesn't.
Because
No, you're right.
although I completely agree with the point, I mean, it's the coaching staff who are picking the team. They
Yeah,
they are oblivious, or they just don't listen to what fans say. But
yeah.
there
And
has
if
been a
Shaw,
shift.
I'm going to
There
say
has been a
Shaw comes
shift in
back and plays
opinion.
well at wing back for 3 or 4 games, then fans will love him again.
And all will be almost forgiven. It you see it
Yeah.
all the time, don't you? Fans are naturally fickle. That is just the nature of fans, of
Mm.
every team, of every country, on every matter. When a player plays well for a few games, I mean, it's just forgotten about quickly, and I could see that happening with Luke Shaw. It's just whether he stays fit, and that is the big if, because he just hasn't been able to stay fit. And if he gets another injury now for the rest of the season after missing the first 4 months, I mean, it's just really not a good look, is it? It'll probably be the kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back for the fans who have
Mm.
still got a little bit of patience with him.
Yeah, this is it. I mean, sure, he needs to get back fit and stay fit, doesn't he? Like I say, his injury record is horrendous, and the first of those you can obviously have great sympathy with. That double leg break at PSV Eindhoven was horrendous, and a horrifying injury. But since then, it's just so often. And I mean, like I said, the fact he's been here for 10 years and he's missed as many games as he's played kind of just sums it up. And I think he's 29 now. You're at a point where he's got to prove himself fit and fit enough to thrive. And I think I've seen a lot of comments on forums and social media and things like that saying Shaw can't play left wing back under Amorim because he doesn't have that energy and that athleticism. I don't think that's really the case. I think he proved for England he could do it. He's played it for United. I think he can do it if he gets fit and stays fit. But that is undoubtedly going to be the challenge. And I think United are going to handle him carefully. That's why I don't think he'll play at Ipswich. I think United are going to be careful and kind of say to him, look, we've given you everything possible here. We've been careful with you. We think you're ready now. Go and play. But like you say, if he comes back and then by Christmas he's out again for, even if it's 2, 3, 4 weeks, it just kind of keeps that narrative going of you just can't have a first choice player who is injured for 50% of the time. It just can't happen. So he is at a point now where he needs to prove his fitness as much as his quality, I think.
He last played for United on my birthday, just February the 18th against Luton Town. Do you remember he came off at half time, which is
Yeah.
pretty staggering, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
And obviously fans weren't really happy that he went to the Euros. He didn't feature in the group stages, but then he played in the knockout rounds and started in the final, didn't he, against Spain? And he hasn't been seen since picking up that injury in pre-season. There's been a lot of muscle injuries at the club. I mean, when you talk about Mason Mount, who was fit at Chelsea, muscle injuries. Luke Shaw now, muscle injuries. And I'll actually look back at the kind of the games Shaw had been playing last season. If you remember last kind of autumn and winter, when he was kind of out for a spell, he'd come back and then he'd be out again. And I broke down the numbers. And he was being asked to play, I think it was around every 2.5 days or every 3 days. It kind of averaged around that after coming back from a muscle injury. And that is just asking for trouble. If you're asking a player to play games in quick succession after immediately coming back from a muscle injury, that's poor management. And he even said in an interview while on England duty, he said, I think everyone at the club would admit I have been mishandled. We all made some mistakes. Because when you ask a player, are you fit enough to play? They probably aren't. They probably aren't at 100%, but they're going to say yes. It's a really bad look if they say no. So that kind of decision needs to be taken out of their hands sometimes. And hopefully now, after the medical department was overhauled in the summer, and there was an investigation into what went wrong, that will change in time. And hopefully we've seen the worst of the muscle injuries, because it was a huge problem last season, wasn't it, those muscle injuries?
Yeah, it really was. And like when you have so many muscle injuries, clearly something is going on there. A lot of them were suffered in training. It became a running joke on Fridays at Carrington that you'd get to Carrington 45 minutes for a press conference and United would drop a story out saying X has been injured in training this week. And it was a constant running joke, like, who's it going to be this week? Which one of them's gone down injured this week? Because it just felt so regular that every week there'd be someone's picked up a knock in training. And, when that's happening, you've got to look at training methods, at workloads and things like that. With Shaw, I mean, he came off at half time at Aston Villa the week before the Luton game. And I think we were all surprised to see him start against Luton. And then he came off again. And, he's clearly got an issue with the way the club handled that, with the fact he was asked to start. When you've got a player with such a backlog of muscle injuries as Luke Shaw, you shouldn't be risking them. You've got to be able to treat players differently.
I mean, I was smashing my head against the wall seeing that. When you actually break it down, because fans just see the injury and they think, oh, it's Luke Shaw again, he's got more muscle injuries. But when you look at the facts and actually investigate and do a bit of digging, it wasn't his fault last season, a lot of it.
No, it wasn't. And you think, I mean, this wasn't a muscle injury, but you think back to Martinez, who aggravated his metatarsal injury against Arsenal. I think played 2 or 3 more games before United realised and got it fixed again. And you look at it and you think, how's that happening? How's that been allowed to happen? That he's picked up an injury in this game. I think he came off at Arsenal, has aggravated an injury he had the season before, and suddenly still plays another, I think it was at least 2 games. It might have been 3. I think it was maybe after Bayern that he finally came out of the team and was out for quite a while after that. And you're just sort of like, how's it been allowed to happen that he's aggravated a really problematic injury? I mean, look at Yoro now. He's had a metatarsal injury and has been out for 3 months. And, it does make you question how things are being managed, what players were being asked to do. Like I said, the muscle injuries have got to link back to workloads and things like that, because it's just, it goes well beyond the coincidence, the number that United had last year. And you do hope that is, it started this year as well. They've had quite a few injuries, not as many as last year, but, I think clearly something had to change in that regard.
Even when Malacia picked up his injury initially, so that was at the end of his first season, he started to suffer some knee pain. I was told the club tried to manage it with pain injections before eventually deciding that surgery was required. So look, I'm not a medical expert, but with the benefit of hindsight, perhaps people at the club would admit that might have not been the best course of action. So look, things can only get better on the injury front, can't they? I think we're both agree on that.
Definitely.
Should we discuss Lenny Yoro then briefly before we end the podcast, because he's almost been forgotten about in the last 2 months or so. And we were so excited to see him in the summer. We were obviously up at Murrayfield to watch his quote-unquote debut, his pre-season debut against Rangers. And he was excellent in that game, wasn't he, Ty? He made a few brilliant passes. He looked quite composed. There was clear signs of his quality and potential. And obviously Real Madrid were interested in signing him. It was a huge signing for United in the summer. And unfortunately, fractured his metatarsal in pre-season against Arsenal, wasn't it, out in the States. So we've not seen him since, but he's now on the comeback trail. It's almost a cliche. Well, it is a cliche, isn't it, when people say, "Oh, he will be like a new signing," but Yoro is a new signing.
He is a new signing, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be great to see him. I mean, he's such a highly rated player. There was so much excitement when United beat Real Madrid to his signature, when United committed the sum they did to signing him, and you can see why they would commit that sort of money. I think it was 52 million plus 7 million in add-ons. He's 18, but he was in the League One Team of the Year last year. He's played a lot of football already. He looks a great centre half. He's big and physical. He's good on the ball, and it's going to be good to see him. I mean, we mentioned injuries a minute ago. It was that first half against Arsenal in pre-season where you're looking, thinking, okay, nothing's going to change here, is it? Because Højlund went off, Yoro went off, and I think Højlund's was a muscle injury. Yoro's was obviously a metatarsal, so someone treaded on his foot, presumably. But that was kind of a moment where you thought, oh, here we go again. And it's been a long road back for Yoro, but he is back in training now. I think he's probably got a chance against Ipswich at the weekend. We'll know more when Amorim does that press conference and is asked about team news.
If he does do a press conference.
If he does do a press conference.
Might never do one.
That's it. Maybe not. Maybe he's decided he's not going to do it. Just take the fine every week. You look at the way he wants to play. I think the one we've discussed almost every aspect of that 3-4-2-1. The one area we haven't discussed is centre halves, because Martinez, De Ligt, Yoro looks a really good back three. I think you've got 3 excellent centre backs there. De Ligt, I think, has really improved in recent weeks. I think he started 6 of the last 7 games now. He seems to have really grown in confidence. You think back to his first couple of games were a bit shaky. Then he had that nightmare September international break with the Netherlands where the manager was saying he'd taken off to protect him. He made mistakes in both games. And at that point, he was clearly at a very, very low ebb. But I think he's improved recently. I think he's looked good recently. I think you've got a back three there who I think are all good on the ball, who are all pretty imposing defenders and bring different characteristics. Yoro and De Ligt are good in the air. Martinez is smaller, but is really competitive, sticks tight to his man. So as a back three, I like the sound of those as 3 centre-backs, and we'll be intrigued to see how they gel as a partnership and as a trio when they do play together.
And I wouldn't write Harry Maguire off either,
No.
because he has experience playing in the back three, and I think
Yeah.
his passing is very underrated. Actually, he's very good at
Massively, yeah.
picking through the lines, isn't he, with his passing? And he had a bit of a renaissance in the last 6 months or so. So it'll be interesting. It's one of the areas that are actually quite strong now, isn't it? Really, when Yoro comes back to fitness, there's going to be options there.
Yeah, there really is. It is, you know, it is a strong area. I mean, they could have sold Lindelof in the summer. I think Lindelof would have been sold in the summer, but for injury. But when you mentioned those three and Maguire, I think as four centre backs, it's got to be up there with anything in the Premier League, really, as a selection of four. So it is. I think it is an area they're strong in, and when you look at Amorim's formation, it's not an area you'd worry about adaptation at all, really.
You've said potentially among the best in the Premier League. So cue Ipswich winning 4-0 next weekend. That'll be the inevitable. Thanks, Ty. Enjoy the Cortinas tonight.
Oh, well, thank you, Stephen.
And I'll enjoy listening to Sam Fender on repeat. That's how I will spend my Friday night. Thanks to listeners. Have a good weekend. We'll be back on Monday. Take care.